Hello, I'm Dr. Martha Hahn. I'm your instructor for Communication Theory, COM 1302 this semester. On Blackboard Learn, you should have already discovered your syllabus and other course materials that will give you specifics that correlate these PowerPoints and lecture notes with other aspects of the course. Today, this is lecture number 1, and we'll be looking at the communication process as well as the nature of theory construction. Assume that Horton the elephant just knocked down a tree in Sherwood Forest, but you didn't hear it. So was there communication? Why or why not? If your professor delivers a brilliant lecture, but you can't remember it, was there communication? Why or why not? Be thinking about these things as we define communication today and talk about different aspects of the process. The communication process involves a source, a receiver, a channel, message, feedback, and noise, all within a given context. The source is the person who does the encoding or creating of the message. The receiver, as you would expect, receives the message and decodes or breaks down that particular message. All communication has to take place in some kind of a channel, and this will be one of your sensory channels. It may be audio, it may be visual, it may be your sense of smell, it may be by touch, it may be a combination of these. Some twins seem to have additional sense like ESP and sense things. I don't have ESP, so if you want me to know something, you got to spell it out and be very direct about it. The messages may be verbal or nonverbal. Very often they're a combination of verbal and nonverbal. Feedback is the response that the receiver gives to the source of the communication. We'll be looking at all of these aspects more later on. Noise is any disruption that takes place in the communication process. It may be internal, such as daydreaming. It may be external, such as a loud noise in the hallway. Anything that interrupts the communication process we refer to as noise. And all communication takes place in some kind of a context, whether it's you alone with your computer listening to these presentations, or if it's you with a friend in the hallway before class. It may be on the telephone, it may be tweeting, it may be on Facebook, but there's some kind of context in which the communication occurs. We classify communication as linear, interactive, or transactional. Linear communication is one way, such as the junk mail that you receive regularly and put directly into the trash can. That's one way. There's no response by you to the sender of the message. Interactive communication is a process much like a ping pong ball or email. One person sends a message, there may be a short delay or there may be a long delay, and the receiver of the message provides feedback and responds to the sender of the message. Perhaps you send greeting cards at the holiday season and you only do that once a year. That's a very slow type of ping, pong process. It's interactive, but there's a delay in the response. Much of our communication is classified as transactional. It's an ongoing, irreversible process. Face-to-face communication is certainly this way. That's why we often have to be careful about what we say, because once we've said it, it's out there and it's irreversible. There are many definitions of communication. The shortest one that I'm aware of is one presented by Marshall McLuhan, and we'll study his overall theory more when we get to the mass communication chapter near the end of the semester. But McLuhan said that communication is simply information transportation. And if you use a broad definition like that, that includes people. It includes computers dumping loads of information to one another. There was one report years ago of a study done where somebody hooked two plants up to a galvanic skin response monitor and then burned a leaf on one plant with a cigarette, lighted cigarette of course, and reported that there was a response in the other plant. Now, I haven't seen that happen, and I don't know whether I would be surprised by that or not. But to the extent that that did happen, then the plants communicated too. But anyway, information transportation. More often in the human communication process, we're more interested in definition 2, which I've provided here, the process by which senders and receivers exchange messages in a given context. And when I use the word communication, and as many of my colleagues do, this is generally, you can change the wording around a little bit, but generally this is what we're talking about, senders and receivers who exchange messages in a given context. Okay, can you give examples of the following? A spoken verbal message, a spoken nonverbal message, a written verbal message, a written nonverbal message. Think about these, because you should be able to provide all 4 of those if you think about it. Spoken verbal, certainly you're getting that right now from me. Spoken nonverbal, oh, that was just a spoken nonverbal right there. Ah, laughter, shouts without direct verbal translation. You can probably think of others. A written verbal message, you're looking at one as you read item 3. A written nonverbal message, the question mark at the end of the sentence is nonverbal. But all the little happy faces, smiley faces, all the emoticons that you often use in your texting messages, those are written, but they are nonverbal messages. Theory refers to as we begin talking about the nature of theory, theory refers to a body of statements that present a clear, rounded, and systematic view of a subject. Theories represent human viewpoints at a high level of abstraction, and we'll be talking about theories and models and concepts and using words like that this semester. We'll look at and examine and discuss a number of theories that relate to small group communication, organizational communication, media effects, interpersonal, nonverbal, and so on. And what we're doing is looking at statements in a specific area that present a systematic view of the subject that we're trying to understand better. Useful theories are widely applicable. That means they have a broad domain, and the parts of the theory fit together with consistency and logical relationships. And there are 3 broad perspectives that we need to consider for a moment: laws, systems, and rules. But let me reinforce that the widely applicable domain is very important, that the parts have to fit together with consistency, they have to make sense, they have to be logical, and the broader the domain is, the more useful the theory is. If we only had a theory about how people on the block where you live or in the building where you work, if the theory only applied, say, to the people in your workplace, that wouldn't be a very useful theory, because if you change jobs, you wouldn't be able to transfer what you knew about your situation into another situation. Or if the theory only applied to people in Texas, then anytime we moved outside the state, visited outside the state, we need to understand a different theory. And when we get to we don't really study cross-cultural communication in this class, but if you take such a course, you quickly learn that there are theories that explain the communication behaviors of cultures different from ours, and that this is not that those theories are not consistent across a worldwide domain. Some aspects of communication are, but many aspects are not and have variations. But anyway, let's look at the three perspectives. The law's perspective says that all A's are B's under conditions 1, 2, 3. Now, what does that mean? Well, all students A, are B's, students at the University of Houston, if they meet the conditions 1, 2, 3. They've signed up for classes, they've been properly admitted, they've had their meningitis shots, they've paid their fees, they may have adequate scores according to the admission standards, etc., etc., etc. All of the students who meet the criteria specified under the conditions, and it may be 1 or 2 conditions, or it may be 150 conditions. But that's the law's perspective. It's very broad. We don't have many law's perspectives, as we'll see, in communication, although we will get to some like you cannot not communicate, and we'll talk about what that means more when we get to the interpersonal unit. Okay, the systems approach we'll be looking at probably in the next lecture. The systems perspective says that A affects B, B affects C, C affects D, D affects E, and so on, and ultimately E affects A. So all the parts are interrelated. They affect one another. A change in one part produces a change in another part. We'll come to that list of characteristics of systems a little later on. But the systems approach has a broad applicability for the communication process, for explaining the interrelationships of people, for explaining how groups work, and particularly in organizational communication it's very useful. And then one of my favorite perspectives, even though it's a little more flexible, or not more flexible, but the domain is not as broad as the law's perspective, is the rules perspective, which says A does B in order to bring about C. A person does a particular thing in order to bring about a specific outcome. And this has applicability for delivering speeches in order to persuade audiences. It's the reason I'm sitting here now taping and recording an audio recording to go behind this PowerPoint. I'm trying to bring about C, a better learning process, a better clarification of the material that we have developed for PowerPoint. Even though the same material has been delivered online and may still be available to you as you're listening to this through the 80-minute lectures that we've put up on YouTube, the approach this semester is to break this into smaller units and try a different approach. So A, your professor is doing B, audio taping over PowerPoint, in order to bring about C, better learning, better retention of material, a more useful process so that you can download it on your iPads and so forth. And ultimately, hopefully, the big C is that you will end up with an A in the class because it's easier for you to learn the material. And just very briefly, we want to look at the types of data in theory construction. And if some of you may have taken the research methodology course ahead of this one, although many of you don't. You usually start with this one. But either way, material or data when you're building a theory is important. And it's generally classified as nominal, ordinal, or interval. Nominal data is a simple listing. Ordinal is rank ordering the data that you have. And interval is statistically weighted information. So, for example, if I ask you, list 6 of your personality characteristics for me. Just make a list of how you would describe yourself. And you do that. Then we have a nominal list. You've just named those things. So then if I say, I want to know more about you, go back and rank order those, please, and put a 1 by the thing out of the 6 items you wrote down, put a 1 by the item that is most like you, and a 6 by the one least like you, and rank order all of those items. Now I have more useful information because I know what is of those which is most and least like you. So ordinal data is generally more useful than nominal data, even though both are valuable. And then interval data is what we get from research studies and using quantitative research methods and so forth. We conduct surveys, we do questionnaires, we do different types of experiments that end up with interval data which is statistically weighted. So then you may be able to tell me, well, you are a student 30% of the time, you're an employee 30% of the time, and you're a parent 100% of the time. You are a friend to other people 5% of my percentages aren't coming out right here. But you get the idea and understand, I hope, that interval data, which is statistically weighted, is much more valuable than simply listing our rank. So why don't we have one big theory of human communication? Well, it will become apparent very soon that the process of communication is far too complicated to simply try to dump it all into one theory. It just won't fit. There are too many aspects. So what we want this semester is to develop a scientific attitude, to take an approach to inquiry that, to be wordy here, it poses itself for the implementation of scientific method. In other words, we want to look at different types of problems, hypothesize about those, make some observations and classifications and generalizations. Because this is a freshman level class, mostly you will be looking at the results of other people's work. We'll look at some things that anthropologists have said about space between people in relationships. We'll look at Shimonoff and rules theory later on, and what kind of rules we have for communicating with one another, these kinds of things. But we're just trying to keep a scientific attitude in this whole thing. So let's look at some characteristics of what effective theories do. A good theory should organize, it should focus and summarize, it should enable us to observe something and clarify, it should explain, ideally it should predict, although with human behavior it's very difficult to predict. Although we'll see a few theories like attribution theory, which says people systematically assign causes for behavior and they'll discount one if another is more plausible. You don't have to write that down now. We'll come to that in another unit. But that's an example of a theory that explains and predicts. Useful theories generate research. When we look at Kenneth Burke's dramatistic pentad, that's a methodological tool with a drama slant to it, and we'll understand how it's been used for a lot of master's theses in researching political campaigns and other historical events. The theory should facilitate communication, and it should enable us to have some control over the situation. So these are the functions of theories: to organize, summarize, observe, explain, hopefully predict, generate research, facilitate communication, and enable control. So we're going to flip those same ideas around when we evaluate a theory and ask, is this theory clear? Is it simple? Is it coherent? Does it make sense? Is it original? Or is this just a variation on somebody else's theory? Does it provide for knowledge integration? In other words, does it fit in with other theories? You can't have the two conflicting paradigms. For example, either the world is flat or the world is not flat. And the original theory, if you will, was that the world was flat. And then It was proved that ships didn't fall off the side when they went out of sight. And so a new theory emerged, and for many years we said the Earth was round. Well, I think better information these days says it's more like it's egg-shaped. But the point is that theories change. They need to be clear, they need to be simple, they need to make sense, they need to fit, and knowledge integration is a really crucial element, because if they don't fit in with other existing theories, then it's problematic. For example, do you know which planet spins backwards? Think about that for a minute. In our solar system, there's one planet spinning backwards, and that's the planet Venus. So if you're going to subscribe to the Big Bang Theory, and most of you are familiar with that, you know, Big Bang is clear, it's relatively simple, it's coherent, it makes sense, it's original, it was original when it was created. Knowledge integration, though, it doesn't fit in, it doesn't explain why Venus is misbehaving itself as a planet. So it's not totally comprehensive. Widely applicable, well, yeah, to all of the solar system except Venus. Is it testable or verifiable? Ah, we got a little problem there. Have you seen any scientists creating solar systems lately? I haven't. So there are some theories that can be tested in order to be verified, but the Big Bang Theory is not one of those. Is it able to predict? To my knowledge, Big Bang Theory doesn't predict. But anyway, we will look at human communication theories and look at those to see how widely applicable they are and which ones have been tested and to what extent they're able to predict. As we said before, it's hard to predict what a person will do because as soon as I say this is what you're going to do, you can automatically generally make the decision not to do that. But these are our criteria for evaluating the usefulness of a theory. And finally, is it flexible? Is it open to change? The world can't be flat and round at the same time. And so some theories have to move over and make way for others and fall to the wayside in the course of scientific research. So some examples of theories, are systems theory, information theory, cybernetics. These are some very broad theories that we'll be looking at more specifically.